Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and today we're going to take a look at AI's best Game Week 1 draft. Now, we have used Fantasy Football Hub's predicted points model in this video to draft a team that will do pretty well for the medium term. So we're not just looking at Game Week 1 here, we have about a 4 to 5 game week horizon, and I agree with some picks, I don't agree with some as well. So we'll take a look at the draft, and then we'll have a tinker at the end with the Fantasy Football Hub My Team tool to try and make some changes to this team and improve it even further. So if you guys do enjoy this video, please give it a like and also subscribe as well if you are new around here. This video is of course sponsored by Fantasy Football Hub, so if you guys are interested later on after taking a look at the tools, you can find a 50% off link in the description down below. Now, let's take a look at the draft right now, and the team value is 100 million. So basically, it's used all the money in the bank. So not a lot of flexibility in terms of price points later on when we see some price increases for players, especially when the game goes live after the Game Week 1 deadline. Players will start to increase in price, and with no money in the bank, that could restrict some flexibility there. So aside from that, the formation is mainly a 3-5-2 formation. And let's take a look right at the players now. Jason Steele is the keeper of choice for this draft by Fantasy Football Hub, and basically I'm not too fond of this pick at the moment, and that's because we don't really know who is Brighton's first choice keeper at this point in time. It could be Jason Steele for all we know, and this could end up being a really good pick, but at this point, because we don't really know whether Sanchez could come back in as the number one keeper, so it is a little bit too risky. Hopefully pre-season gives us some information there, but if it doesn't, then I think it will be too risky to go with Jason Steele for now. So I will be replacing him, and a little bit of a spoiler, but I will be replacing him later on when we start to do a little bit of tinkering. Let's take a look at the defenders now. We have John Stones, Ake, and Estupiñán. So Estupiñán, firstly, in his own right, I think has incredible attacking threat. We saw last season how he scored against Arsenal towards the end of the season, and also aside from that, there was a lot of times where he was putting in loads of crosses that looked really good, and he could have gotten more points as well. So in his own right, Estupiñán is a great pick. He's actually in my own team, but I don't really like the double up on Brighton defense here, so that's another reason why I want to remove Jason Steele. Even though they do have a good set of 3 fixtures right out of the blocks, they play Newcastle and Manchester United in Game Week 4 and Game Week 5. So there are a lot of other teams out there with a good run of defensive fixtures out of the blocks as well. So a double up I don't think is necessary for Brighton defense. So I would probably keep Estupiñán, and I would advise swapping Jason Steele out for someone else. Now for Stones and Ake, AI has chosen to go with a double Manchester City defense here. 5.5 for Stones and 5.0 for Ake. Now it kind of makes sense from a predicted points perspective why both of them would be in this draft. City defenders do have a really good run of fixtures, and it kind of makes sense that they would score well. Right out of the blocks, City do have kind of the best 6 defensive fixtures, but Pep rotation is something that we will have to keep in mind, and I don't think the draft or the model actually has taken this into account. So that brings a lot of risk when we're going with double Man City defenders. It kind of doubles the risk of Pep roulette as well. So I would say that it could be that Stones is slightly more nailed than Ake. We don't really know at this point in time, but I probably would replace Ake. So later on in the tinkering section, I'll remove Ake for someone else. So now let's take a look at the midfielders that AI has picked out for us. Now in midfield, we have Saka, Odegaard, Marcus Rashford, Bruno Fernandes, and Bryan Mbeumo. Now most of the budget, as we can see from this draft, is concentrated in the midfield. There's 3 8.5 midfielders, 1 9.0 midfielder, and 1 6.5 midfielders. So it's one of those drafts where it's super heavy in the midfield, and it tries to bang on these big names as we'll discuss. So Saka and Odegaard, both of them at 8.5 million. Arsenal's fixtures are pretty good out of the blocks. 3 home games in the first 4, and they're against relatively easy opponents as well. So you'd expect Arsenal to do pretty well, especially from the goal scoring department. And both of these players did incredible for Arsenal last season. They're both nailed starters as compared to Martinelli or Trossard or even Havertz. So Odegaard, as always, he's the playmaker, and you would expect all the Arsenal attacks to flow through Odegaard. So lots of chances for him to get goals or assists in and around the box. And then Saka, of course, as we know, he's on penalties. So I don't really mind this double up at all. And if I were to double up on Arsenal midfielders, this is actually the double up that I would go for. Now, Rashford and Bruno Fernandes is double up on the Manchester United attack. Now they have 2 home games in the first 3, and these are against Forest and Wolves, so you would expect United to have a pretty good start to the season as well. I myself am coming round to the idea that maybe the solution to the Rashford versus Bruno Fernandes debate is basically to just have both of them. I'm coming around to this idea that it could work out. Now, Bruno Fernandes is on penalties. His chance creation statistics from last season top the charts, and the real issue actually last season was that United just weren't converting the chances that Bruno Fernandes was creating. So if they did have better conversion rates, you would expect that Bruno Fernandes could have scored even more points last season. So that's kind of the reason why it could be justified to go for Bruno Fernandes. And then Rashford, on the other hand, 9.0 million. He's slightly more expensive than Bruno Fernandes, but he has showed us last season what he's capable of and kind of justifies this price tag as well. He's the talisman for Manchester United, so you would expect him to start the season off really well. And then for Bryan Mbeumo, he's a really good enabler in the midfield at a pretty reasonable price point as well. He could be on penalties, as we know, because Ivan Toney is suspended all the way till next year. And on top of that, Bryan Mbeumo did step up really well towards the end of last season, right? He found himself in the striker role pretty much most of the last couple of games, and he did really well there. So if he does pick up in that position as well, moving forward for the start of the season, he could be playing as a forward when he's listed as a midfielder in FPL. So that's kind of an ideal situation where he's out of position and he could score more points for getting the same amount of goals, right? So Bryan Mbeumo here is the last pick in this midfield. Now, of course, there are quite a number of midfielders that we are missing out from these 5, and basically the obvious ones would be players like Mitoma, Salah, Maddison, Son as well, but AI has chosen these 5, and I will do a little bit of changes later on. We'll see whether we keep this midfield 5 as well. Now up front, I think it's no surprise that Haaland is of course included in this draft. It would kind of be crazy not to have AI predict that Haaland would do very well considering the numbers that he was putting up last season. Gabriel Jesus as well is also expected to do pretty well. In terms of the expected goal department, Jesus actually had one of the best expected goal statistics last season, but he just missed a lot of clear chances. He missed quite a couple of sitters. So if he does kind of correct that this season and hopefully put more goals in the back of the net, then you would expect him to start the season pretty well. And let's take a look at the bench now. So there's Macy as the backup keeper, there's Baldock, Adebayo, and Bayer. So Macy as a backup keeper is actually another pick that I would kind of want to improve in this department. I would go for Areola, so it's a little bit of a spoiler as well. Then for Baldock and Bayer, both of them are defenders, are 4.0 enablers as well. I don't mind them at all. Of course, there is Bell from Luton as well that we could go for, but I don't really mind going for Baldock and Bayer. They're pretty much enablers that would just be sitting on the bench for most weeks. It is also important to state at this point in time that Luton and Burnley would be a blank in game week 2, as we have just noted from the Premier League announcement. So basically, in that situation, we may want to be a little bit more careful with the 4 mil defenders that we pick. Maybe going for Bell and Bayer would not be as wise, and maybe having Baldock like this draft could be a little bit safer. And then for Adebayo, he is actually the first choice striker for Luton. He did play a lot of games last season, probably in the larger part of the games last season, he played most of them, right? And 5.0 is actually his price point. Now, I kind of prefer to just downgrade him to a 4.5 striker, and that's simply because I don't think it's worth it, right, to just have a 5.0 striker sitting there on most of your game weeks, right? He'll be on the bench. I'd rather just have this 0.5 in the bank and kind of have a little bit more flexibility when we see some price rises later on, as I mentioned just now. So those are kind of the changes I would make, but in general, when we take a look at the big picture of this draft, I think it's really heavy on the attack, right? I probably would want to make some changes to the defense, as I mentioned just now. So let's now take a look at the Fantasy Football Hub My Team tinkering tool to try to improve this draft even further. So we're looking at the Fantasy Football Hub website now, and basically they also have mobile apps, whether it's on Google Play or on Apple as well. So whichever platform that you prefer to use it on, you can kind of use the Fantasy Football Hub tool on it. So it's really useful. And basically I've loaded up this squad exactly as shown in the graphics just now onto the screen. And also it is pretty useful that they have this team rating here and also a game week rating. So the team rating kind of takes into account the next couple of game weeks, and the game week rating of course only takes into account that game week. So it's 97% for this draft that we've just taken a look at. So that's pretty high, right? And of course, let's try to make some changes to it, as I mentioned just now. So for Jason Steele, I would actually replace him, right? I'll remove Jason Steele, and the player that I would actually rather go for is actually Flecken, right? So basically, David Raya is heavily linked with a move to Spurs, and if that does happen, then Flecken would probably be the keeper of choice for Brentford, right? So in that situation, I actually prefer to have him as compared to Jason Steele and double up on the Brighton defense, right? So that's one of the changes I would make. Now, John Stones, I think, is okay to keep. I think he's slightly more nailed than Ake, right? And I will probably replace Ake with another defender. So after considering a couple of defenders to try and improve this draft, I think Luke Shaw is the one that I would go for. I am aware that there are quite a couple of tough fixtures in the first couple of game weeks, right? But after the game week 2 fixture against Spurs and also the Arsenal fixture in game week 4, the run after that all the way until the mid-season point, or actually maybe game week game week 8, game week 9, when you can actually wildcard to set your team up later on. I think Luke Shaw is a player that could set up pretty well for the first game week all the way till you wildcard, right? So that's pretty much why I have him in this draft. Of course, it is minus 0.5 in the bank right now, so I will be making a change. And as I mentioned, Adebayo, I would be replacing him, right, with Surridge. So he's actually the 4.5 forward that's currently in my latest draft. I think he does have, I guess, the highest chance to start for Nottingham Forest. But at this point in time, 4.5 million forwards are usually bench fodder, so I wouldn't put too much thought behind that. So Surridge, he will fill in for Adebayo. And then in terms of the substitute keeper, Macy, I would also remove him for Areola, as we mentioned just now. And then after making these changes, I think this team looks pretty alright, right? I think having the team of Flecken, right, Estupinian, Stones, and Shaw, which is a kind of a diverse defense that allows you to cover majority of the teams with kind of a decent run, right? And then Rashford, Odegaard, Saka, Fernandes, and Mbeumo, I'll be keeping all of them. I think I'm not opposed to doubling up on these Arsenal and Manchester United players in the midfield. Brian Mbeumo also, I think he's a great enabler. He's also in my own team. At this point in time, if there were a couple of major structural changes that I would make to this team, it would be to possibly sell an Arsenal attacker, right, and go less heavy on the Arsenal attack, and maybe have Gabriel in defense instead of John Stones, right? Because I do like Gabriel's attacking threat as well, but I do also understand the attractiveness of going for a triple Arsenal attack as well, right? So for the purpose of this video, I've just left it as the draft wanted it to be, which is a triple Arsenal attack. But for those of you guys who kind of want to diversify a little bit, going for Gabriel is fine as well, right? So I've kept all these Arsenal players and also the double Manchester United players in midfield, right? And then up front, of course, Haaland is going to stay in the team. Gabriel Jesus also stays in the team. On the bench, Areola, Baldock, Surridge, and Bayer. So basically, if I were to make some changes to the team we saw just now in the graphics, this is how the team would look like after the changes has been made. And as you guys can see, 69.5 predicted points for this team. That is pretty good, right? And also still keeping the 97% game week rating. It has dropped a little bit, maybe 1% in terms of team rating, but I think keeping in mind that the model does not have everything accounted for, I think removing Ake for Shaw in terms of wanting to account for Pep Roulette, I think that is also something that will kind of affect the team ratings a little bit. But I do like the shape of this draft, right? It's a 3-5-2. Yes, it does use most of the budget still, and there could be some issues in terms of flexibility. But if we were to make changes in the midfield, right, these are actually midfielders that are very easy to go downwards from. A lot of the midfielders, the value midfielders, are about 7.5, 6.5. So it is pretty easy to just downgrade these midfielders, considering they are quite expensive. And then Up front, there's Gabriel Jesus. You could also downgrade to a 7.5, maybe Darwin Núñez or Nkunku from Chelsea as well, right? So there we go. This is pretty much what I would do to the team. And aside from that, this is the Fantasy Football Hub My Team tool. You guys can try it out for yourselves as well. And aside from that, if you do become a member, there are a lot of useful tools as we see here. There is the toolbox function where there's Optastats, fixture analyzers, where you can kind of arrange the fixtures in a way that allows you to see which team has the best fixtures, to target for the next couple of game weeks. There's also predicted points. There's also player comparisons as well. There is also a price change indicator as well for those of you who do understand how important it is to catch those price rises, right? And then other features that are quite useful, and I've been pretty much reading these articles from these experts, FPL Salah, Big Man Bakar as well. All of them reveal their teams here, and on top of that, there are a lot of social media channels as well that Fantasy Football Hub does have. So do check them out if you guys are interested to become a member. The link is in the description for 50% off, right? And that's it for this video. I hope you guys do enjoy this one. Let me know what you think of the AI team, and let me know of this improved team that I've just showed you guys here on the screen. I'll be interested to know what you guys think as well. So drop them in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in more pre-season content for the FPL 23-24 season very soon. Bye bye.